Okay, in this video we're going to start from scratch and we'll add a UI table view, and then we're going to add our own custom class for UITableViewCell. So I'm going to create a basic app. And starting out on the storyboard, we'll add a table view. Then we'll add a table view cell. And this is like a prototype for all of the cells that are displayed within our table. So in this project, I'll add a list of activities, and so I'll have three labels. First, I'm going to just have the activity name. Try that again. So this will just be the activity name. And I'll have I'll have a note. And a cost. So the cost, let's right align it, and let's dock it to the right side instead of the left, so it stays on that right outside of the cell. And let's change the activity name to bold, and let's make the note a little smaller, maybe 14, and italicize it. So this is our prototype cell, and so right now it just uses UITableView. UITableViewCell, the default class. But we want to add custom connectors. We're going to add like an outlet for each of these labels. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own UITableViewCell class, and then we're going to connect those outlets to it. So I'm going to go over here and just click on the top level folder and create a new file. It's going to be a Cocoa Touch class file, and I already have it populated from a previous example, but you just go over here and type in UITableViewCell, and typically we just add something in front of that. So this will be activity table view cell. And we want to remember that name, because what we're going to do is we're going to go into storyboard now, and I'm going to drag this up. In the storyboard, then we can click on our prototype cell, make sure it's the table view cell that's highlighted, and we're going to need a reuse identifier so that when we're in our UI table, table view data source, we're going to need to load this cell inside of our cell for row at method, and we'll need to call it by a reuse name. So I'll call it activity cell. And then we want to come over here to the identity inspector, and we're going to click on this drop down arrow. See where it says class, and by default it's a UI table view cell. It has that little placeholder there and just defaults to it. But if we click this drop down arrow, now we'll see our custom class. Now if we didn't have any classes that were UI table view cells, then nothing would show up in this list. So I'm going to select Activity Table View Cell, and so now let me click back on to make sure. Okay, so now we've got activity table view cells the type, and we've got this activity cell reuse identifier. All right. Okay, just like we are going to specify that the table view has a delegate of view controller, we also need to specify some IB outlets in our activity table view cell class here. So I'm going to add some IB outlets. One for activity, and again, we added that as a UI label. Oh, I probably need to unwrap it. And I'm going to add one for activity note and one for activity cost. And so now we've got three outlets: activity, activity note, and activity cost. And we could add some custom code in there. This is where we'll put like events if the cell's selected or anything that we want to do custom in this specific type of table cell. I'm going to go back to the storyboard now, and I'm going to just connect these outlets to our labels in the storyboard. So here we have activity, connecting it to the activity name label, activity cost, and activity note. So now these are connected inside of our custom table UITableViewCell. And let's go back into our view controller, and we're also going to add an outlet for our table view. And let's unwrap it. Now we need to make this a data source and a delegate, and an easy way to do that is just to say table view dot delegate equals self, and table view dot data source equals self. As soon as we do that, we know we're going to get prompted here for some missing method stubs that we need to override. And I click on this, and now we've made it ourselves. Now we've made our view controller a UI table view data source and a UI table view delegate. Now we should probably create a class or something for those three fields, so each activity has a note and a cost and an activity. I'm just going to create some parallel arrays just to keep it simple. In case anybody's watching that doesn't really have a grasp on classes, and I don't overcomplicate it here. So we've got activities, activity notes. Let's keep it consistent here. Activities notes and activities costs. And let's make activities cost double. Now we need to add some elements to the arrays. Let's do that. Let's just. I'm going to create a function. Just keep it easy. So let's say add activity, and we'll have an activity. It's a string. A note, also a string, and a cost, which is double. And I'm going to say self.activities. Append activity. Self.activity notes dot append note. and save for costs. So we're just popping these into the array. Then we can play around with some different examples of a different number of elements in there real easy. Okay, so let's now add our UI table view method stubs and see what else we need to add to make this a working example. So number of rows in section is going to be equal to, we only have one section in this example, so it's going to be equal to activities.count. And cell for row at is where it gets a little interesting. So we're going to say, we're going to change this method a little bit so that instead of returning a UITableViewCell, now we're going to actually return an activity table view cell. So I'm going to first create a cell for our table view, and what did we call it? We called it, remember our reuse identifier? This is where we need to use that. So we called it activity cell. I'm going to copy that and then back in our view controller. So here's where we're going to pull that prototype cell that we designed inside storyboard. Now it knows that this is not a standard UI table view cell, so we need to cast it as an activity table view cell. So that's the only difference really. Now we're going to have access to all of those outlets that we created inside of our activity table view cell class. So I'm going to say cell dot, and check this out. We've got, oh, what doesn't it like? Oh, it is a string. Okay. Okay, so now let's take a look at the properties, and you'll see that we have access to those three outlets that we created. So activity, activity costs, and activity node. So what we're going to do is just populate this with the text property. We're going to populate it with the values in our array. So we've got activities at index path dot item. This is the row number, and we're going to do that for nodes and costs as well. And finally, cost. Okay, so now we're populating our IV outlets inside of this cell with values from our arrays. And there's a message I noted. It's that we're taking a double value from our activities costs and trying to assign it to a string property for text. So what we need to do is we need to reformat this or cast it into a string value. So there's a casting function string, and it takes two arguments. So we're going to take this first as a formatting argument, and the value is going to be whatever we want, and we're going to put a percent placeholder. This 02.f is going to say that it's a floating point value with 2 decimal places. So and the percent sign's the placeholder. It's going to insert this value for us, and the $sign is just a string literal character that we want to put inside of our value to make it look like a currency value. Just going to prefix it with self there. I don't need to, but just want to. Okay, and finally we need to return the cell, and that's it. So we don't have just access to the default UITableViewCell properties. In this case, we have the IB outlet values that we created inside of our custom UITableViewCell. We need number of sections. Not going to work without that. And there's one thing that we didn't do. We didn't actually add any values to our arrays. Let's just make sure it runs at this point. Probably a bad demonstration showing you all to not compile and run your app. Okay, so we've got our iPod Touch. Another thing that we're probably going to need to do is resize the height of each row. Did we not set up our table view properly? Let's see. Presently, unwrapping that optional value. Huh. Look at that. I guess one tricky part though too is you can't run it too often because there are so many pieces that are dependent on each other. So it runs fine now. So we can see it's generating a table. Obviously there's no data in our array, so it's not going to display anything. So let's go ahead and add some values to our array. So we'll add activity, and I'm just going to add, let's see, hiking, and what's a note? Breathe some fresh air. Costs $0, like that. And how about biking? And not that I bike that fast, but I have some need for speed. $0 again. And let's say go to a movie. Okay. Still show movies during COVID. And oh, we're missing our labels. Let's make those optional. So we've got, we're going to add this hiking. This is our note and a currency value. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. And we should see. Okay, so hiking, $0. Row is not big enough to show the label. Biking and go to a movie. Let's go ahead and add, let's run it on a different device too. It's important to run your app in lots of different devices to see how the size of the device affects. Taking a little while there. I should have left it on the iPod Touch. Okay, so same thing there. So what we need to do is we need to set the row height, and we can do that dynamically. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say, right now we have some with these notes and some without the notes. Let's take the note off of one of them, and we'll dynamically set the height, just as a little better example, I guess. So I'm going to say height for row at, and this just takes a CG float value. So I'm going to say if activities notes is equal to an empty string. Let's return, let's say 50. If otherwise, then it has a note value. We'll return 80. So I've removed it for that, and we shall see if that's large enough, I guess. Oh, whoops, sorry. Can't compare an entire array to an empty string. So we need index path.item. So it's going to grab the element for the row, and it's going to check to see if that node is equal to an empty string. If it's empty, then we'll make the row 50. Otherwise, we'll make it 80. I'm not sure if that's going to be big enough or not. We shall see. I really want this iPhone 8 to work. Let me just change it back to... Let's see. Okay, so there we have it. So hiking, you can see the note. Biking does not have a note associated with it, so the height is 50, and go to a movie is 80 because it does have a note. So that's it. So remember, when you're creating that custom UI table view cell, all those steps that you have to take. Give it a reuse identifier, create the outlets, design your custom prototype cell and storyboard, give it that reuse identifier, make sure that you set that class to your custom activity or UITableViewCell class. Remember how we created that? We went to File, New File, Cocoa Touch class, and we created it as a type, UITableViewCell. And again, the standard is just usually put in a custom name here, TableViewCell. Make sure that you wire up the outlets. So we need to actually connect these outlets in storyboard. Make sure that you go to your view controller and wire up your table view outlet as well. And then inside of your view controller, you need to when you do the DQ reusable cell, you're going to need to cast it to your custom UITableViewCell class. All right, let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.